welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and the date is, let's see, this is September 6th. Walk in the Park, episode 175. You can see all of my public access television episodes of Walk in the Park on my video blog, walkinthepark.tv, walkinthepark.tv. And you can also see the schedule of all the cable casts of the current show. And if you go to the pegasus.webstarts.com, this is the public access television channel 13 in Ithaca, New York website, where you can see all the series that are being shown by public access producers in Ithaca on this website, and lots more information about how you can get involved and become a producer yourself. So this week we are going to go to Watkins Glen State Park and take a close look at one of the waterfalls there. So let's get up in the air on Google Earth and look down at the south end of Seneca Lake, just west of Ithaca, about 20 miles, and just a mile or so south of the lake on the left-hand side of the valley, the west side of the valley, you can see that groove. That is the gorge of Watkins Glen, the gorge called Watkins Glen. And here we are turned around looking from the east, from the village, seeing the groove coming down in the middle there. That is the gorge, Watkins Glen. So we're going to zoom down further, whatever, and look at a closer to it. You can see the main entrance down there, which is actually being all redone now. Next year there'll be a whole new main entrance. It'll look really good in 2018. And now the first section of the gorge past the main entrance is a deep, dark hole in the earth where there are some neat waterfalls and some neat stuff, including this waterfall in the middle of it. And this is called Minnehaha Falls. Minnehaha Falls. And it's been called that for quite some time. Now, Watkins Glen was first opened as a resort, as a scenic resort back in the 1860s, 1870s. It continued on until 1902 or so, early 1900s. Actually, it became a state park in 1906. But the process of turning it into a state park began around the turn of the century. So anyway, this Minnehaha Falls is named after this waterfall, probably. This is the original Minnehaha Falls in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that's a kind of an interesting story there. This is actually by a famous 19th century landscape artist, Albert Bierstadt. And let's see what it has some. Okay, this was date unknown. Albert Bierstadt lived between 1830 and 1902, and he was one of the most famous Hudson River School landscape artists of the American West in the 19th century. So now here's a cool photograph. This is might be one of the first known photographs of the Minnehaha Falls in Minnesota. And okay, I'm reading from. I got this online. The name Minnehaha Falls was in common use by 1855, when the publication of the Song of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow brought the falls worldwide fame. Longfellow's epic poem features Hiawatha, a Native American hero who falls in love with Minnehaha, a Native American woman who later dies during a severe winter. Longfellow never visited the falls himself. He was inspired by the writings of Mary H. Eastman and Henry Rowe Schoolcraft, and by a daguerreotype created by Alexander Hessler when he chose a name for Hiawatha's lover. The image was taken in 1852, according to a letter written by Hessler, as discussed in Minnesota History magazine. So there is the original picture, photograph, 1852 by Alexander Hessler. That may have inspired Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. I will say, by the way, that Hiawatha is actually an Iroquois name, named after an important figure in Iroquois cultural heritage. So let's take it. This is an early drawing of Minnehaha, of the Indian maidens, supposedly Dakota. Okay, so this is John Henry Buford's cover for The Death of Minnehaha in 1856, so I guess a book about that. The Song of Hiawatha, epic poem of trochaic tetrameter by Longfellow that features Native American characters. The epic relates the fictional adventures of an Ojibwe warrior named Hiawatha, and actually we know he was an Iroquois person, and the tragedy of his love for Minnehaha, a Dakota woman. Events in this story are set in Pictured Rocks area on the south shore of Lake Superior, which I think is a national seashore. Longfellow's poem, though based on native oral traditions surrounding the figure of Manabozho, represents not a work of transmission but an original work of American Romantic literature. Well, I don't know how Native American people or Indian people or whatever you choose to call feel about the taking of these figures and names and so forth from their culture and mixing them all up and turning them into a European American epic. Anyway, let's go take a look at Minnehaha Falls, the original one. Minnehaha Park is a city park in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and home to Minnehaha Falls and the lower reaches of Minnehaha Creek. Minnehaha Park lies within the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, a unit of the National Park Service. So that's pretty cool. Here's another photo. This one. This park takes its name after the beautiful stream and its spectacular falls that plunge 53 feet into a gorge before running out to the Mississippi. Now I'm going to show you a little video for a few minutes, a clip from someone named M.N. Ariel that will give us, it's going to be a drone video of the falls in Minneapolis. So that's coming right up. So that's the original Minnehaha Falls. Here's another one. This one's in Georgia. So this is about 100 feet high. It's a series of cascades. Minnehaha Falls is a series of cascades located on Falls Creek in Rabun County, Georgia. The waterfalls descend about 100 feet over steppe rock formation. So this Minnehaha name from Minnehaha Falls in Minnesota has made the rounds from probably from Song of Hiawatha, and I presume that's how the Minnehaha Falls in Watkins Glen, this waterfall, was named. Well, almost. Okay, we're going to take a look now at Watkins Glen's Minnehaha Falls from a little bit of a distance in the gorge, this first section of the gorge, which used to be called Glen Alpha. So coming right up here. Okay, so there's a good perspective in the deep gorge where Minnehaha falls. Now, I'm sure you noticed the tall waterfall in the background, when deep in a dark section there of gorge called Cavern Cascade is the tall waterfall. That's the first waterfall you can walk behind in Watkins Glen. Right now, there's a tunnel at the far side of it. It goes up through the cliff called Spiral Tunnels. You can walk behind it. In the old days, you couldn't, as you'll see later. But so Glen Creek comes out of Cavern Gorge that holds Cavern Cascade and pours over Minnehaha Falls. So is that Minnehaha Falls? And there's another little falls below it. Well, here's another image actually of Minnehaha. This was from 1904. I'm not sure exactly how this was used. Another illustration for Song of Hiawatha, I think, that was published then. In any case, let's see where Minnehaha used to be. So this is from a page from a guidebook that I don't expect you to read. But the bottom of this page is, it says, it's when you've come out of the main gorge there, you're going up through it. It says, we now catch a glimpse of the second cascade. The first one was one right at the main entrance called Entrance Cascade. I haven't got a picture of that right now, and it's called Minnehaha. Well, wait a minute. Look at that little waterfall down at the bottom there. That is, maybe that's Minnehaha. Let's go to the next page of the guidebook. This guidebook was published, I think, in the 1870s originally. Minnehaha, which is beautiful, irregular, and yet full of grace. The water broken. Wait a minute. Okay. Looking at the wrong thing here. Okay, here we go. I'm off the wrong page. The water, broken several times in its fall, is dashed into foam and spray, which forms a brilliant contrast to the dark, rocky surroundings. About 30 feet above Minnehaha is Fairy Cascade. So Fairy Cascade, which with one graceful bound leaps into Neptune's Pool. So, and beyond that is Cavern Gorge up in there. You see a little glimpse of the Cavern Cascade. So let's go back to this picture and compare it. So I think back in the 1800s, they were calling that first little waterfall on the bottom, they were calling that one Minnehaha, and the other one was what, Fairy Cascade, which we now seem to call Minnehaha. So here we go again. In the center of the picture is what we now call Minnehaha Falls, but it was once called Fairy Cascade, and below it, we don't call anything that thing below it at all, but I think that's what they called Minnehaha in the old days. Maybe. Okay. So anyway, what do we got coming up next here? Let's see, look at my list here. Oh, okay, we have a nice picture of, this is a photogravures of Watkins Glen. This is from the 1800s, late 1800s. And if you look back, so that's Minnehaha, what we call Minnehaha now, in the lower middle of the picture, and then in the back is some staircases and bridges and such. And back in those days, you had to climb staircases over, here we go again, Minnehaha, Fairy Cascade, I assume, and then something called the Long Stairs. This is from an old stereograph. Here's a drawing. Again, in the back, you can see the stairs, and this is what we call Minnehaha now. So, what's the story here? All right, so this is from a brochure in the early, after the park was created, so sometime early in the 20th century, and it's got featuring in the middle of that picture on the right. That picture is featuring Minnehaha Falls with Cavern Cascade in the background. So it looks like the name had shifted to the waterfall in the background. So let's look at that. What do we have here? So we're going to go in a little closer to Minnehaha Falls in this video. Coming right up here. So why am I making such a fuss about this little waterfall? Well, this waterfall is a unique structure, and it also is instructive about other waterfalls and pools and so forth in the gorge. So we're now going to take an even closer look at the falls from above. And if you go up the trail on the to the side of the falls, you can actually, go back here. You can see the trail is climbing up by the falls. People will peer over the top of the waterfall into the pool below, and they will see what makes this waterfall structure unique. So let's take a look ourselves. Coming right up here. Aha! So the pool that it flows into is heart-shaped. So why is that? What's the story or the stories behind that? Before we get to that, I'm just going to remind you that this is Walk in the Park, recorded September 6th, 2017. If you want to see all of my episodes and the full schedule of cable casts of my Walk in the Park episodes, go to walkinthepark.tv, my video blog. Let's go back to Minnehaha Falls, pouring into Minnehaha Pool. It is heart-shaped, and there's no other, I don't know of any pool quite like that around. There are some pretty odd-shaped pools around and gorges around the region, but here in the Watkins Glen, this one is distinctive. Now I said that the name of the waterfalls may have shifted from one to the other, but there is a story, an Indian legend, or whatever you want to call it, that somebody along the line made up for Minnehaha Falls, and they forgot about the Song of Hiawatha, I guess, and decided that there was once an Indian maiden. There's always an Indian maiden. I don't know why they say that, but in any case, who was in love with a guy and another Native American person guy, and he had a rival. There was another boyfriend, another guy that wanted to be with her, so he killed this girl's boyfriend, and she was so broke up that she threw herself off the cliff there, and as she fell, her heart became this pool. So well, we know that's a lot of hooey, but and a lot of these gorges around here have had Indian legends ascribed to them, and some of them are clearly garbage, and others are, who knows, but they may have some historical correspondence, but we won't get into that story now. Maybe you go to Teaganic Falls, you can figure that one out. But we do have a geologic explanation for the heart-shaped pool. Let's go down here and take a look at this one. This is another pool in the gorge, and they're fairly low water, and look at all that junk that's in the bottom of the pool. I actually think this once had a waterfall pouring into it. The waterfall has since eroded away all the rock over which it flowed, leaving this plunge pool, that's what you call them, or you can call them potholes if you want, that rocks collect in, and when the high water will actually move all kinds of stone downstream, including boulders like this one. This is well, you see the rocks around it, the gray rocks that we're familiar with in the Finger Lakes region. Those are shale, siltstone, sandstone, occasionally a piece of limestone. But that rock is not. That rock probably came from up in Canada or the Adirondacks. Billion-year-old rock, some kind of metamorphic granitic type rock, maybe granitic gneiss or something like that, whatever. In any case, the most important thing about it is that it is very hard. And the rocks like that, this rock was probably rounded by rolling underneath the glaciers when they were here, because the glaciers brought these rocks from up in Canada, and they dropped them, left them behind when the glaciers melted away, and probably rolled along in a furious river of glacial melt water underneath the glacier, and rolled these rocks that had picked up in Canada together and smoothed them off and left them all over the landscape in the soil and so forth until they get washed into our gorges and collect in holes like this one. And when you have high water, they just roll around and they act like a drill and drill out holes. So the pools, most of the pools, actually, Watkins Glen is famous for its waterfalls, but it's also famous for its pools. And there was a travel writer named Tip Roseberry back in the 1980s that wrote an article about it called The Poetry of Potholes, about Watkins Glen. So rocks like these wear out holes like those and like those, but also like this. My hypothesis is on the upper right, the water was flowing over there at some time in the not too distant past, maybe some centuries ago, and it eroded the rock over to the left, and it left this lobe off in the upper right there, and then it started eroding on the left and eroded out a lobe there, making it look heart-shaped. So that's my geologic explanation. Also, the Glen of Pools is another spot below what's called Rainbow Falls. We'll do stories about these as well. We'll get into detail. That's a series of ledges, short falls that drop into beautiful potholes or pools that are undoubtedly eroded out by stones like that. Okay, so that's our story of Minnehaha Falls and the origin of its name and the shifting of its names and so forth around history. It's kind of fun. So we'll be going on to look at other waterfalls and sections of Watkins Glen, and I'll share those with you in a future program. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you again soon. I encourage you now to turn off this screen and go outside and enjoy our beautiful natural world. Go out into some of our parks, state parks and preserves throughout the Finger Lakes region and throughout our marvelous upstate New York and northern Pennsylvania and so forth, wherever else you can get. So we'll see you again soon. All right, I've got to flash down here to an exit image here. Not that one. Oh, here we go. That's what I want. Okay, while we transition to say goodbye.